Welcome to the EO Queensland podcast, where we take you inside our chapter and go deeper in conversation with our members and community. My name is Kevin Porter, and today we are joined by a superstar. This is a gentleman here who joined EO as an accelerator, grew and scaled his business to become an EO member, and now has been nominated to be our president for the year ahead. I don't know how he fits that in. 3 businesses, 3 kids, but I'm sure we'll find out more. Welcome, Scott Fell.
Thanks.
How are you, mate?
Good, mate.
So for those that aren't aware of your story so far, take us on the journey. How did you get here thus far?
Look, if I go right back to the beginning, like so many current EO members, I was introduced to the notion or the idea of EO by Mike O'Hagan, who's a former member, still an active in the entrepreneurial space, I guess, over in the Philippines there. But I did a weekend workshop with him. It sort of blew my mind, just the way he spoke and the way he thought. And that was in 2016, I think, 2015, 2016. And I knew that I sort of wanted to grow. At the time, I had the education business, and I'd actually bought the second business, the lotteries business, which is a family business. So I bought that one, but it's a bit of a weird niche. I won't go into too much detail, but it's because of the nature of it. I really felt like I cheated. Like I hadn't grown a business. I didn't have these like staffing issues and all these weird, wonderful business processes. So I really wanted to learn how to grow a business. And I just had a lot of passion for. It excited me, that idea of growing a business, whether it was because of the entrepreneurial sort of family background or just that sort of understanding of solving problems and systems, creating systems sort of really appealed to the engineer in me, which is obviously where my background and training sort of is.
And so you did that through the tutoring business first?
Correct, yeah. So I think technically the lotteries business almost would have qualified me in its own right, but I really wanted to learn those skills. And so that was in 2017. So I stayed in there for, I think, just over 12 months or 18 months and graduated in 2019 when I sort of really found that I was getting so much value out of the structure and the tools. And I continued going to the learning days for years after. But I really wanted to be, I guess, a smaller fish in a bigger pond and get experiences from people around the table who had sort of were at that size and much larger, ideally. So, and that's certainly what I found as soon as I joined. So, just being around slightly bigger businesses and entrepreneurs who had been through bigger problems or bigger business problems.
And so just connect the dots. In the accelerator program, you learnt the content, you joined the monthly groups, and you scaled your business. Was it that easy?
Funnily enough, it's almost, and I, having been to many of these days, there is certainly an element of overwhelm there. I think the key for me was just continuing to execute on what was being delivered, but not necessarily everything that was being delivered, because I think it just would have been too much. And so it was just focusing on moving the needle where I felt it needed to be moved at the time, and sticking to that accountability of making sure that I was making the changes that needed to be made. So what I did find though is that when I went 1 year and then, say I would go to execution day 1 year, I'd go back the next year and I'd take different things away because it related to my business differently. Even though maybe some of the tools were the same, they landed differently 12 months on. And so that sort of kept me coming back for, I think, about 4 or 5 years. I was doing those programs, and I still go back every now and again now.
And what does the tutoring business look like?
So that's been under management basically from day dot, because at the time that I started, I was working full time as an engineer. So I needed to be off the tools. I needed somebody else to be making the calls and things like that. So that meant that margins and stuff like that were probably a little bit different to some scaling businesses where the entrepreneur was fully in the business. But it forced me to sort of build the systems and capability without me being too involved, certainly during work hours. So that business now has a couple of staff here that manage 2 different territories, and they're supported by a back office team of 6 who manage anything from bookkeeping to HR, marketing.
We're talking an offshore team, right?
Yeah. So they're all based in the Philippines.
And you were never a tutor?
I was before I started the company. And that was kind of where, one of the main pitches that I had when I was speaking to new clients was that I'd actually learned how to learn. And I joke, but it was deadly serious. I actually failed at 2 subjects in my first semester of uni, and one of them was called Introducing Professional Learning. And I couldn't even scrape through with a conceded pass. But what happened was I'll use maths as an example. I came out of school with just getting through to where I wanted to be, got into the degree that I wanted, but probably mentally wasn't quite mature enough yet, and didn't really understand what it all meant. And so I did no work. I'd gotten through school just based on, I guess, natural ability. I really didn't work or study. And when I finally got to uni, and that was actually necessary because of how much harder the content was or how much faster you went through it, I sort of had that bit of a come to Jesus moment and sort of self-realization after that first semester, going, well, hold on a second, this is actually what I want to be doing. I need to take this seriously. And the pitch that I landed with my students was that I actually took my maths result from 18% to about 93% in that 6-month window. It was the same subject. I just did the work. And so I'd sort of taught myself that not only can I do it, it was also just having the faith that if I just put in the time that I'd learn what I needed to learn and I could understand it. And so that sort of was what led me into going, well, hold on a second, these students coming out of school or going through high school aren't actually learning the skills that I was applying to actually learn what I needed to learn.
Got you.
And so I was after that first semester, I actually cut my study time down because I was able to work a lot smarter, but still achieve good results.
And so coming out of that probably put you in good stead to become an engineer, but also your current business, Ardent. How did you land on that, the third business?
Yeah, third time's a charm. So I think for me it was always a bit of a passion. I enjoy designing things and solving problems, and I see a lot of my business and the nature of that work go hand in hand. And so it was somewhat fortuitous that I kept doing it after I resigned from that full-time role. I kept doing it on the side, and because it was just of interest. It was a bit of a hobby, I guess. But we had an opportunity to pick up a client who put through a fair volume of work. We were just at the right place at the right time. We were able to help them out with a problem that they had that their previous engineer was not. And we did. And once we got an agreement with them, I realized that I didn't want to keep being on the tools, so to speak, or I didn't want to be the one delivering that work. And so that was when we first hired our first engineer and basically started that business. And that was just shy of 3 years ago. But I was able to start that business with all the skills, and I guess what's a way that it's been put to be one of my coaches was, that business is built around the current version of me, whereas my tutoring business now was built around an older version. And so there's actually a gap there that I actually need to take my team through as we're working on things.
And would I be safe in saying that the first version was the scaling up tools, but now more of an EOS style?
Yeah.
Does that have something to do with it?
Yeah, it's probably, it was, and I did, we did make a bit of a shift. We still refer a lot to the scaling up tools, and I do use them as tools to use different lenses to identify stuff within the business. But what I found was, for me, the EOS style structure of communicating that vision was a lot simpler for my team to comprehend. And so, I do use both of them, but I guess I would argue that there is a lot of similarity. It's a lot about cadence and structure, and it's an operating system for a business, right? Correct. Regardless of what you're using. I think the thing for me though was like that first staff member that I hired, he literally walked in and I gave him a vision. You know, I had a VTO, I had core values, I had all those things. I literally had that VTO, that 2-page VTO, and I'd given that to him on day one. So we had this vision that sort of said, look, this is where we're going, this is what we're going to build. I had no idea how accurate it would be. And as it turned out, we got to our 3-year vision in about 12 months.
Wow.
But it was using the strategies that I'd already learned over the previous sort of half a dozen years or so.
Wow. What I find curious lately is hearing that the scaling up days, which we still hold here quarterly in EO Queensland, they're actually adding a lot of AI to it as well. So
yeah.
I feel like if I went to one more recently, I'd probably learn even more new skills. So
yeah, definitely.
All right. So from business, the other part that we love in EO is the family and personal part. So family-wise, how do you juggle it all?
I mean, you asked me on a day that I had a short day yesterday and a short day today because I've got 2 sick kids at the moment. So and my wife's back at work, so we're just sort of juggling that. We do have some help at the moment, but I would probably argue that I don't think it's a balance per se. I think it's a management exercise. I think there will be times when I'll take time to go to the assembly for the kids. There'll be times that I'd take them to appointments or pick them up in the afternoons or drop them off in the mornings or whatever it is. And I do a lot of that reasonably regularly. But then there'll be times that, twice a week I'll have 2 full days out with EO stuff, or, that week will be my quarterly day with my team. So, I think it ebbs and flows a lot, and it's just a case of managing those priorities for me.
You're managing it well?
I think so. Hopefully my wife agrees. But
and moving on to personal, I know this has been quite a journey for you. I'd love to hear more introspectively what you might have learned along this journey so far, especially with the balancing, building businesses and juggling, being a family man, being an EO guy. Like, how's that all gone down for you?
I think the biggest growth for me has certainly been the last few years as I've probably become a bit more self-aware. I think, and EO's had a massive part to play in that. I simply would not sit down and reflect every month if I didn't have that forced reflection. And, even to date, my regular sort of morning routine or whatever, it even ebbs and flows a little bit. And I think for me, it's not necessarily about perfection. It's just about that management as we go, I guess. But what's changed for me probably a little bit in the last few years is that that North Star for me has become quite a bit clearer. And what that has meant is that as I've sort of gained that self-awareness and sort of gotten a lot more clarity about what it is I'm trying to do, and probably more importantly, who I am, that's probably changed significantly. Not that I've changed significantly, although I feel like I have. It's more so that it's given me a lot more clarity to identify what to me is important and not, and to really make sure that I can maintain that, not balance, but manage all of those things.
I see. Any mishaps or horror stories you'd care to share in that learning journey?
No. I think early on, one of the growth areas for me has been that the development of others. And I think early on, I was far more systems focused. And so being from that sort of engineering style look at things, the process, I remember, and this is probably one of very few statements in my life that I would use the word regret for, or that I probably not regret, but I certainly look back on and go, there is no way I would say that now. And it was basically, I said it to, she was one of my managers at the time, I said, everybody's replaceable. Ooh. And it was part of a performance conversation about somebody, not her, but it was just, there's no way that I would say that now.
Right.
Irrespective of whether it were true for a case or a scenario or not, I just wouldn't look at it like that anymore. Mm-hmm. And so I think for me, the EQ side of developing that self-awareness has really changed how I interact with the team. I'd say that time when I felt like I was really, if I reflect back on it, I was really process oriented. I really didn't care who was running the process. I just wanted to run the process. It was probably not an ideal fit.
It's a curious learning, isn't it, in an age of AI that we've been swept away with in the last 12 months. So be curious to see how you go with that moving forward. Well, most of us entrepreneurs go with that moving forward.
Well, yeah.
And so in and amongst this, you haven't just stepped up to be president. You've actually stepped up multiple times. We could call it extracurricular EO activities to give back to the chapter as well. Love to hear a bit more of that, what the journey was like.
Look, like a few people, more than a few people in the EO space, I sort of use this phrase voluntold. I feel like I was probably voluntold for my very first, I was trying to think back when that was. I think it was fairly early. It might have been 21, 22 possibly. And it was actually my former coach who was the Accelerator chair at the time. And she said, look, we need a coach. You'd make a really good coach. And I was like, sure, okay. I could probably coach Accelerator. She goes, no, you're going to coach the key execs. I said, wait, what? And she goes, yeah, the key execs of the EO members. And I had in my forum like a number of sort of tenured members or board members at the time. Their key execs were in my accountability group. And I was quite daunted by that. But I think, and I actually, fresh off the gala, I was actually reflecting on that and reflecting on that whole journey, the whole learning piece, which started there. That I think that the key for me throughout that journey was that it was actually the other people around me, the people who saw that I'd be able to do something that I didn't realize that I probably could. And what I sort of honed in on was there was this notion that there were people within the organization that were building belief in me, whether they realized it at the time or not, because I certainly didn't realize that was what was happening. And so, that journey went from key exec coach to accountability group chair on the Accelerator committee, which you know well, to the Accelerator chair for a couple of years, and then forum co-chair, and now governance this year, stepping into president.
Wow.
So along that journey, and it was really only probably the last 2.5 years of that, maybe 2 years of that I really became aware of what that journey actually meant to me. And prior to that, it was just not quite flying by the seat of my pants, but it was very much I was doing it because I was getting back. I was getting learnings out of it. I was growing, and I could feel that, but I didn't really understand why. And so, it's been a busy few years, but I keep doing it because I keep growing.
It's interesting, going back all those years when you were that key exec coach, I had a staff member in that group.
You did too.
And now I look back and think, I thought you handled it brilliantly. I would not have known that it was your first time being a coach.
Yeah.
Look, for those out there that are looking to be on any sort of board or community board or school board or industry boards, what's your key thing? Or what's your why that you would have got? Or what's the biggest thing you've gotten out of volunteering your time?
I think it depends on the role. And again, at the time, I didn't really know this. And I think it's only become clearer to me as I've started to prepare for this role, as I've sort of reflected on my leadership journey and spoken to a lot of other members about their leadership journey. And I think if you really boil it down, that there are certain things, not just the general sort of leadership stuff. There are hard skills that you can learn in those roles. So, the coaching role with the key execs, and whether it had been key execs or accelerator, it probably wouldn't have mattered. I learned a lot of hard skills around coaching, and I probably call them hard skills because I sort of see them externally. There's probably a lot of soft skills in there as well, but there was probably a lot of personal growth in there as well. I think any board role or leadership role within EO or any other board for that matter, there would be elements that you could actually take away. And I think the opportunity is actually to be really clear about what it is that you're trying to get out of it. There are a number of members who if you talk to, and I'll use the EO lens here, but if you talk to them, and I actually asked one to join us on a board dinner at when we were at GLC, and they will articulate that, they might have been on a 10-year leadership journey, and every single one of them, they've taken on the role to intentionally grow a particular part of themselves. And for me, when I look back at it, I go, well, if you want to be a really good leader of your team or your team leaders, you've got team leaders in your business, or you're trying to grow the business, and that's a layer that you need to improve on. Being a coach is actually a really good way to do that, because you're kind of doing those one-up leaders. If you want to learn how to sort of really moderate and lead maybe sort of C-suite or those sort of senior leaders, being a moderator is actually a really good way to do that. Accelerator chair is another good way to do it, because you're starting to now do up that sort of two-up leaders. And particularly in EO, where you're forced to sort of, and any board role for that matter, where you've got volunteers, you're forced to lead through influence. You'll learn a lot of those sort of internal personal leadership and growth skills along the way.
Yes, good point. Good point. And so moving into being now president, I mean, to me, that feels so daunting. But I'm sure it was for you along that journey as well. But does it feel as daunting now coming into it?
No.
Tell us, unwrap that for us a little bit more.
Not anymore. I mean, there are still times that I get daunted by scenarios, but the whole concept isn't as daunting as it once was. I think if we go back to the very beginning for a moment, that skill that I learned way back at uni, and there's been plenty of other times that this particular characteristic I think has sort of come up, which is that I learned that if I just sort of put my mind to it, I'd get through it. I'd make it work. I'd be able to cope with it. I'd grow. And I think when I put my hand up for it initially, that was what carried me through that process. It was just this almost unfounded, not unfounded, it's founded, but this confidence and self-confidence that I'd be able to make it work.
And for the listeners, this is 2 or 3 years in the making, right?
Yeah, 2.5 years ago.
Just to put your hand up and say, I'll be president.
Yeah. So I was like, that's a fair lead time, right? Like, I'd be able to work it out by then for sure. And what sort of came about was about 9 months actually after that. I was sitting in the strategy day and watching the incoming president sort of run that strategy day, and I've gone, I can't do that. Like, irrespective of the mechanics of standing up there in front of people. And I was trying to describe it to somebody, and I think if you're a leader and you've sort of put yourself out there and you've put yourself in an uncomfortable position before, like sometimes you just sort of get this weird feeling, and it's sometimes hard to describe. And I was actually trying to describe it to somebody the other day, and the responses I got back were like, oh, so like you don't like talking in front of people? I'm like, no, that's not it. Oh, but so you're like a perfectionist? I'm like, no, that's not it either. Like, it was just this innate observation going, I'm not going to be able to do that to the extent or the level that I'm going to be happy with. That I'm going to do it justice, or I'm going to honor the role, or the people who have put that, who have instilled that belief in me over the years. And so that was sort of 18 months ago now. And that was when I sort of turned around to a mentor of mine and said, look, I need some more structured help because I don't think I can do that. My businesses weren't in a position that I could probably dedicate as much time as I would have to. And I don't think I was going to be ready. the people who are around the room, the leaders on the board are genuinely, excellent leaders in their own right. And so for me to be able to sort of stand up the front and not just lead them, but help them grow on their journey, I think was daunting. And that was sort of the start of that next sort of growth journey, I guess.
You're doing a cracking job so far. So. I think that's the best part of EO and other organisations as well, where you're not just thrown in the deep end here. You've gone to trainings and conferences, even being a coach or being a moderator, you get training to do these things.
Yeah.
So, and during the trainings, you get learnings and growth, and then you go into the deep end.
Yeah, and I think often within EO, you sort of look at it and go, and I probably don't think this way now, but I certainly did when I started. I was like, oh, those guys have it all figured out. And even within forum or within, like, if you're in an event, you're like, oh, that guy's just got it all figured out. And then you serve on the board with them and you're like, wait a second, they've got the same problems as I do, or they've got the same, reluctance or the same challenges, or they're on a growth journey as well. And so nobody's really got it all figured out. We're all just learning and growing at the same time, and we're all at different stages of that growth journey.
I think that's the best insight of all. No one is on a pedestal here.
No.
Good insight. And so coming out of that, a lot of presidents have a theme for the year. And I'm really curious to hear about your one and how you came up with it. Most of the themes have been a one-word thing, but you've obviously gone above and beyond, and 3 words is better than one. So tell us more.
So one thing that I will, I guess, let you in on is that run into certainly presidency and I guess board roles as well is it starts early. So there is planning behind it. And from a presidency standpoint, like our first training was in September, I think, of last year. So about 9 months ahead.
Wow.
And so not only, for EO Queensland, we serve on the board as the president-elect and governance chair. So it's almost like a pseudo vice presidential role. We sort of get in on conversations so that we're across what's happening and the longer term planning decisions and things like that. But I kid you not, from basically September or even earlier, I was reflecting on what my theme would be. It's been 12 months in the making.
Wow.
And it was about 6 months in that I felt like, so this is probably now 4 or 5 months ago, I was fairly confident where I was going to land. And there's a saying, it's the ambition, the EO global ambition, and it's to transform the lives of entrepreneurs. And one that stuck with me, having reflected on my journey, was that notion of transform. And I was, for about 6 months, I thought, yep, that's it. That's what it's going to be. And what was strange was that actually made me more self-aware. It made me more conscious and actually more nervous, because I was like, how am I going to commit to transforming people? Like these excellent leaders, these in their own right, that yes, they're on their own leadership journey, but I'm like, that's ambitious. How am I going to do that? Not just for my board, but for the chapter. And it wasn't necessarily that I bailed out, but I pivoted slightly, because what I realized was that the transformation, that I align with that concept quite well, that global concept that we have, but that transformation's a result. And when I reflected back on my journey, what actually became clear to me was that my growth hockey sticked and accelerated when I actually started to get clear about what I was trying to achieve and who I wanted to be, and who, sort of through that journey, what I was trying to learn. And so when I then boiled it down, I was like, well, I want it to be intention. Was the one word that I landed on. And then I was challenged by a mentor of mine, and he said, well, you could go with one word, but he goes, that it's ambiguous. He said, just play around with it. He goes, see what happens if you try and go use 2 or 3 words. I went, okay, let's think about what that is. And I started to reflect on that some more, and then identified that, well, yes, sure. If you just say intention, that can mean a lot of things in a lot of different contexts. And it's not that the theme that I landed on can't, but it forced me to come a little bit clearer again, about what it was specifically that I was expecting or asking of people. And so the theme that we landed on was begin with intention. And to me, that was basically the source of my growth over the last few years. But I think also the opportunity, it articulated the opportunity within EO and within, our chapter, that if we want to transform the members, or if we want the opportunity to do that, or we want to give them the opportunity to transform, that's going to be a whole lot easier if they're really clear about how they want to do that. And so I think it was at Forum Retreat, actually, I was toying around with this idea, and I think I shared with Forum at the time that there was a metaphor that we use in EO around EO as a gym, not a spa. And I sort of doubled down on that a little bit and said, well, imagine going into a gym and not knowing, A, what you want to work on. Maybe it's just, I just want to get fit or I want to lose weight. But then also not knowing what the equipment does. And so 99% of people just walk over and go on the treadmill.
Yep. And
so for me, it was, well, if I can help people, if I can have this little thread woven in throughout the year and go, well, let's just stop and think for a moment about what it is we're trying to create here, whether it be the environment we're trying to create for members, whether it be a particular event. We've got a chapter advance this year, so a chapter retreat. If we just get really clear about what it is we're trying to accomplish there and at an individual level, how we want to turn up, then my feeling was that A, that was something that I could really get behind, and B, it was tangible, and it was something that wasn't a result. It was the beginning.
Yeah, you've definitely got me thinking of the intention for the next 12 months, whether that be on a board role or just myself as a member, personal learning, business learning. So it gets you thinking, which is kind of the point. Look, in closing, I'd love to hear a little bit about what you're most excited. Think of it like quick fire questions. What are you most looking forward to for the 12 months ahead?
Look, fresh off the back of the strategy day, I'm actually super excited to see how the board works together. I've spent 9 months planning for what this next 12 months is going to look like. And we've really started to bring the board on that journey over the last sort of 4 months. And so I have gotten to know them a lot better now. And I'm super excited to see what they can do.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to the chapter advance Fiji, but hey.
It's going to be awesome. Yeah.
And what has been your favourite EO moment thus far? You've had a few.
I still go back to the very beginning, and it was actually my first ever gala. So this was, I think I might have still, I was still in Accelerator at the time, I think.
And for those listening, the gala is our end of financial year, handover of boards, celebration of the year.
I think it was the first one I'd attended. Whether it was the first one that I was around for or not, I'm not sure. But it was at City Hall in town there, and they had us set up for drinks and canapes and stuff before going into City Hall out in King George Square.
I remember that.
And they had us cordoned off, and I can't remember how many people were in attendance. There might have been 100. They had us cordoned off. They had a string quartet out there playing. Yeah. They had a lady walking around. It was a masked theme.
That's right.
A lady walking around with an albino python.
Yeah.
And that night I met a bunch of EOs who I'd never met before. I met Mick, Emmanuel, who was a president elect at the time, I think, or he was a president since then, and a bunch of others who it was just this level of authenticity, and I just was like, who does this? It was just this bizarre feeling that just sort of overwhelmed me almost, and it was just the conversations and the people who I sat with that night, who I spoke to that night. I was just like, this is where I want to be. I want to be around more people like this. Not because of the python, not because it was in King George Square, because of the wow factor, but it was just the yeah, I was just like, yeah, this is cool, and this is where I want to be.
And a shout out to Mick if he's listening. He is great for a conversation. He's always willing to share. Love it.
Yeah.
So speaking of conversation, this will be the last question I ask you. If EO members come up to you at an event or accelerators, what's a conversation that you would love them to bring up with you?
Ooh. Anything EO related. I was thinking about this the other day and what type of conversations I prefer having, and there's really none. Like EO conversations are I feel slightly different to the rest. You know, they're just, whether it be that they go to a level of depth, they're certainly not uncomfortable in any way, shape or form, but you know, if somebody wants to come up and ask me about the journey, if someone wants to come up and ask me about my fears around that, like throughout that journey, I'm more than happy to talk to them about it. Those things come up all the time, and the reality is it's EO is the place that I get to talk to people about that stuff, because no one else will get it.
Yeah, good point.
So yeah.
Very good. Well, thank you for your time today. Appreciate it.
Welcome.
And I'm sure you get a few members coming up to you for the next 12 months.
Time will tell.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks, mate.
Appreciate it.
All good.
Thanks for listening to the Inside EO Queensland podcast. To learn more about EO Queensland, visit eoqld.com.au. And of course, if you've enjoyed this episode, please follow or subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.